Hello, here's my response to the Lesson 8 video reflection and analysis. For my response for the first prompt, it asks, defend the perspective that the first step in the five-step decision-making model is the most important. So the five-step decision-making model is a complex model that helps, actually, it's not really that complex. It's a very simple model that helps us define and solve as well as making decisions regarding certain problems, and it is a very common strategy used by managers. The five-step decision-making process uh, contains the following steps. The first one would be to define the problem. The second one would be to identify and weigh decision criteria. The third one would be to generate alternatives. The fourth one would be to rate said alternatives. And the fifth one would be to choose, implement, and evaluate the decision, which would eventually lead to solving the problem or making a good decision and essentially resetting the entire decision making process. So the prompt asks to defend the first step, also known as the defining the problem, as the most important step for this uh, process. So the defining the problem is the most important step in this decision making model because it helps us not only identify a problem which essentially makes it builds up the base for the entire uh, process, but it also helps us notice and find the nature of said problem, which essentially helps us make better decisions regarding the problem, and it helps us find a way to solve it, or it helps us find a way to make a better decision regarding that problem. That's my defense for the first step in the five-step decision-making model. That's being the most important. Not saying that the other steps are not important. Every step is important in its own unique way. But the first one is the most. That's my take on defending, or my perspective on defending the first step in the five-step decision-making problem. The second video prompt asks, in what type of work situations would satisficing be appropriate? Satisficing is basically the whenever someone doesn't strive for perfection and instead just aims for acceptable results or good enough results. And this technique would usually be effective or implemented whenever, for example, an employee is under a very tight deadline and needs to submit some type of project to their manager, but he doesn't have time to uh, design or edit every single slide for a file, for example. He doesn't have enough time to perfectly analyze and edit every single slide to be perfect. So he needs to use satisficing so that the slide is good enough to where the presentation is acceptable, but it's not perfect. Uh, it could still have better. It could have been better. Another situation where satisficing would be acceptable would be for hiring entry level roles or temporary roles. Why it would work? Well, for entry level employees, usually the manager is supposed to mold. As a matter of speaking, the manager is supposed to mold said employees into what they wish they are. So they're supposed to train them and tell them how to operate certain sections of their jobs, so that these employees would be basically they can grow better with experience. That's why satisficing is okay on entry level positioning. There are many other examples, such as, for example, buying office supplies. It it's not always necessary to buy perfect uh, equipment for an office. So it's okay to buy just some random stapler, for example, that you find in Office Depot, rather than the looking online for the best type of stapler. So that's satisficing. It's okay to be implemented in that type of situation, since usually you just want something that will get the job done. not something perfect for that type of situation. The same question also asks, list at least three occupations or industry where satisficing would not be an appropriate strategy for decision making. There are many work situations and industries where satisficing would not be appropriate, as well as there are some situations where, although it's acceptable, although satisficing is acceptable, it's not recommended since it doesn't leave the best example. It doesn't make you look good. Satisficing doesn't always make you look good. So, but anyways, back to the question. One of the first points or industries that would not be okay to use satisficing would be on the medical industry, specifically under critical whenever they in the medical industry, whenever they are attending a patient under critical circumstances, it is not okay to use satisficing because uh, making a decision that will just be acceptable is probably not good because it will endanger the or put threaten threaten the life of the patient be at risk. If he's in a critical condition, only the best choices should be made regarding said patient. Another uh sorry about that. Another situation where it would not be acceptable to use satisficing would be whenever making decisions that, or specifically risky decisions that could endanger the return of a company after a decision. So, if it's a company that let's say is making a deal or a decision that or an investment, so to speak, that will eventually end up having 20% return, let's say, but it is not okay to use satisficing because that situation needs to be analyzed. Maybe it's a 20% return, which is good, but there's a high risk and a very high possibility that the company doesn't even make that return because of some uh, situation that could have been avoided if the company hadn't used satisficing. So whenever making an important decision for specifically a decision that has a high risk regarding return for a company, it is not okay to use satisficing because every small point could eventually lead to the company losing money on that type of because of that deal. So it is not okay to use satisficing. The third and final example that I wanted to provide for this question would be negotiating some type of contract, some type of high stake contract to be more precise. This situation, it is not okay to use satisficing because it is not okay whenever dealing with such an important contract, it is not okay to be good enough. We have to strive for perfection, as sometimes there might be either for once the other company we're trying to make a contract with might not agree with what we're trying to do if we're simply going for good enough. But not only that, they might also uh, if we're going for good enough, then they might also take advantage of that and make some type of deal that benefits them a lot more than it benefits us. So it is not okay to go for good enough when dealing with that type of contract. For the third question, it asks to discuss the relationship between creativity and innovation. Is it possible to innovate without creativity, and is it possible to be creative without innovating? Defend your position. So creativity is generating meaningful ideas by individuals or teams according to our notebook. And innovation is the creation and development of a new product or service. So these two definitely work together as it is sort of a process. You need to be creative to generate an idea, and then you need to be innovative to develop said idea and bring it to life, so to say. So moving on to the next question, is it possible to innovate without creativity? Uh, I believe that even though maybe one person is capable takes over the creativity and another person is capable of the innovation, I do not believe that it is possible to be innovative without creativity. Sure, one person can be innovative and innovate the idea that another person came with by being creative, but it is not possible to just be innovative without including creativity. Now, the next question is the opposite, and it asks, is it possible to be creative without innovating? I believe that it is possible to be creative without innovating, as to me, these two work as sort of a sequence. Creativity and then innovation, bringing said creativity to life. So it is definitely possible to be creative, someone to have a good idea for a business, but then either something might happen. Either that person believes the idea is no longer good enough, or maybe it's overshadowed by a better idea, and that other idea is innovated. So that first idea is just laying around there. So I do believe that it is possible to be creative, and it works sort of like a step sequence. You are creative. You come up with you create an idea, and then you innovate said idea afterwards as like the second step. So that would be the relationship between these two. The fourth and final question asks, under what organizational circumstances would you choose a job candidate who exhibited creative potential but lacked practice creativity experience over a candidate who had worked in an environment where opportunities to develop practice creativity were extensive, but who exhibited less creative potential? Under what organizational circumstances would you choose a candidate with obvious practical practice creativity skills over someone with creative potential? So, before I answer, I want to point out that creative potential is the skill and capacity to generate ideas, whilst practice creativity is the ability to spot opportunities to apply creative skills in the workplace, or in other words, to use creative potential in the idea, or to take advantage of creative potential in the workplace and use it in specific areas. So, for the first part of the question regarding, uh, let me see, under which organizational circumstances would you choose a job candidate who exhibited creative potential but lacked practice creativity over the opposite? So, someone who exhibited creative potential, aka the ability to generate ideas, but lacked the ability to use them effectively. So, one of the possible positions that I would use someone like that would be when trying to create a long-term leadership line or management line, so to speak. Since in set type of situation, you're trying to build leaders for the long term, which if you're trying to do this, it is not necessary to have immediate creative practice creativity, since we're aiming for the long run, they will develop this on their own. Another situation I would employ these type of people would be whenever emerging on newer technology, uh, or fields that are undergoing constant upgrades or constant evolution, so to speak. It is important. It is not necessary to have experience or practice creativity, since these fields are generally new, so it is not common for people to immediately know when to use practice creativity, which is a skill that will eventually be developed as you work in said situation for longer. Now, the question also asks, or the prompt also asks, under what organizational circumstances would you choose a candidate with obvious practice creativity skills over someone with creative potential? So basically the opposite. The opposite situation as the one I just explained. For jobs with practice creativity over creative potential, I believe that it is most important to have, so to speak, it is necessary for immediate creativity to be used in the workplace. So whenever a job requires someone with experience, so to speak, um, in a in using or in applying certain set creative skills, that is when practice creativity would be more important than creative potential, since it is necessary. The uh, practice creativity basically, to me, it is a skill that requires experience to master, and it is that's why I believe that whenever a job needs something needs someone with specific practice creativity, they also need someone with experience on the field. And whenever someone needs to complete said deadline, that is when practice creativity is more important than creative potential. Anyways, that will be the end of the uh, video reflection analysis. Thank you very much.